On November 29th, 1972, Atari released its first game, Pong. This game, despite being just two paddles and a ball, would be the start to a new form of storytelling. As time went on, we had games like Doom and Super Mario, games that clearly had a story, but they were pretty bare bones. As time went on, the stories grew with games like Undertale, Red Dead Redemption, and The Last of Us, games with full stories in their own right. And with the birth of a new medium for telling stories, but new ways to utilize that medium to its fullest, or ways to fail to utilize that medium. Let's talk about ludonarrative dissonance. Originally coined as a blend of ludology, the study of games, and narrative, which just means story, by Clint Hawking on his blog in October 2007 in response to the game Bioshock, saying, Bioshock seems to suffer from a powerful dissonance between what it is about as a game and what it is about as a story. Bioshock is a game about the relationship between freedom and power. It is, at once, and among other things, an examination and criticism of Randian objectivism. It says, rather explicitly, that the notion that rational self-interest is moral or good is a trap, and that the power we derive from complete and unchecked freedom necessarily corrupts and ultimately destroys us. The game begins by offering the player two contracts. One is a ludic contract, literally seek power and you will progress. Bioshock goes the extra mile and ties this game mechanical contract back to the narrative in spectacular fashion through the use of the Little Sisters. By dressing up the mechanics of this contract in well-realized content, the ludic contract works in the sense that I actually feel the themes of the game being expressed through mechanics. The game literally made me feel a cold detachment from the fate of the Little Sisters. Harvesting them in pursuit of my own self-interest seemed not only the best choice mechanically, but also the right choice. This is exactly what this game needs to do. Make me experience what it means to embrace a social philosophy that I would not, under normal circumstances, consider. Unfortunately, when we take the first ludic contract and map it to the game's second contract, the game falls apart. The game's second contract is a narrative contract. Help Atlas and you will progress. I don't have a choice with regards to the proposition of the contract. I am constrained by the design of the game to help Atlas, even if I am opposed to the principle of helping someone else. In the game's mechanics, I am offered the freedom to choose to adopt an objectivist approach, but I also have the freedom to reject that approach. Under the ludic contract, if I accept to adopt an objectivist approach, I can harvest Little Sisters. If I reject that approach, I can rescue them. Under the story, if I reject an objectivist approach, I can help Atlas and oppose Ryan. If I choose to adopt an objectivist approach, well, too bad. Now, not every game falls into ludonarrative dissonance. Plenty fall into a neutral space. I can hardly say a game like Mario has its gameplay and story in conflict, but I wouldn't say they enhance each other. They exist in tandem, sure, but I hardly feel like Mario's gameplay is needed to tell the story, or that without the story, the gameplay loses its impact. It comes to a neutral plane. But there isn't just dissonance and neutrality, there can also be ludonarrative consistency. Ludonarrative consistency, also known as ludonarrative harmony, is the exact opposite of ludonarrative dissonance, where the story and the gameplay complement and elevate each other. A great example of ludonarrative consistency in action is Spec Ops: The Line. Released in 2012, Spec Ops: The Line appears on its surface to be another common war shooter game, but instead it takes a turn to act as a harsh critique of the depiction of war in games. Though the game starts like any other shooter, with cover mechanics, foreign enemies, and even turret sections, the game slowly changes, becoming closer to a horror game like Silent Hill rather than Call of Duty, complete with horrifying visuals, painful moral choices with no right answer, and even full hallucination segments to enhance the deteriorating mental state of the main character. Honestly, this is only a tip of the iceberg of the game's mechanic changes, and I would highly recommend Why Spec Ops: The Line Mattered by Game Maker's Toolkit if you want a full breakdown. But basically, the game presents itself like the typical fun war games at the time, but slowly changes both the gameplay and the story to become more horror-centric as the game goes on to critique the depiction of war in video games versus the reality. But while Spec Ops: The Line achieves ludonarrative consistency through its pre-existing styles of gameplay, as do most games, there is another way to achieve ludonarrative consistency, by forging a brand new type of gameplay around a story. Before Your Eyes is a 2021 adventure game developed by Goodbye World Games and published by Skybound Games as their first title, and it immediately stands out. In terms of story, it follows the main character, Benjamin Bryan, in his journey to the afterlife, getting to view his life in retrospect as the ferryman tries to find a way to sell his story to the gatekeeper so that Benjamin can reach the gatekeeper's paradise. Though the story isn't the world's most unique, what makes the game's title stand out is that a key mechanic of the game is blinking. Actual blinking. The game uses your computer camera and uses your blinks to stop your time and move to the next sequence of Benjamin's life. It really gives this feeling of fleetingness and enhances the feeling of wanting the moment to last, but knowing it has to end. You have to blink eventually. I won't go too in depth because this is a game I would highly recommend you to experience for yourself. But I bring it up because I believe it is a prime example of what games should be striving for. Before Your Eyes had a story to tell and found a new style of gameplay, a new style of user interaction to elevate its story in a way no other gameplay or no other medium could do as well. And I think we need more of that. I think we need more innovation in thinking about how best to use the uniqueness that video games bring as a medium that involves direct user interaction and how to tell interesting stories. Because video games have come a long way from Pong, and I believe they have so much farther they can go.